going on, guys? I'm Ben Bateman.
And I'm Jeff Sneider.
And we are
The Action Guys.
Look at that. Jeff's a fan of the show. He knew the cue. I didn't even have to tell him. Just kidding. I told him right before the show. He's never watched the show before. But I know Jeff. I know him from the movie space.
That's right. And I'm excited to be here. I was honored to get this call. This is a big episode.
This is one of the ones I'm the most excited for. Today on the show,
pretty flattered.
We are going to be contrasting the careers of Paul Thomas Anderson and Quentin Tarantino, two of the preeminent auteurs of their time.
Whoa, big words.
Pretty incredible guys. Two of my probably favorite and definitely most influential artists I've followed in my adult life. I mean,
absolutely.
Incredible talents. So this is the Action Guys. My normal cohort Andrew Guy is not here today. He's coming back from China today. He's been doing Clash Royale stuff, which is the Twitch casting he does for the video game world. And I could think of no better person than the person that I may be playing in a singles match in the Movie Trivia Schmodown soon.
If you're lucky.
Possibly. We have to jump some hurdles to get there. But did you see, by the way, the poll that got posted? I know you did.
I think I did see it. I think I remember being at the very bottom of it. That's why I don't really go on the Facebook page, because people are crazy.
The absurdity of that is that both Mike or myself have to win 2 matches to play in the title match. You have to win 1 match, and you are the overwhelming underdog, which is incredible that people think that.
Man, beats me.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But, you're wearing a fancy jacket. You look good.
Thank you.
I'm excited.
Yeah, where's yours? I thought you were wearing the jacket.
So you put the jacket on.
Yeah.
I psyched you
I
out.
tried to dress up.
Yeah. That's okay. You look good. You look good.
Thanks, buddy. It's a tan.
So Jeff Sneider does a bunch of cool stuff here at Collider. You guys are listening on the Collider podcast feed right now. Please leave a review, rating. If you are listening to this and you want to see what we look like, the jacket versus sweater thing going on here, you can go find the full video version of this on the Action Industries YouTube channel. It goes up every single week early for patrons on Tuesdays, and then on Fridays it goes public to everybody. So you can check that out.
Too much handsome for one episode. I don't know.
You're a handsome dude. You've got salt and pepper going on. I can't wait for that. That's something I'm looking forward to in my life. So we're going to be talking about Tarantino versus PTA, guys, and stay tuned for some other shout-outs mid-episode. We'll be talking about some pretty fun stuff. But jumping in, first things first, these guys both burst onto the scene in the 90s, a few years apart. Tarantino's got a few years on him. I would say, though, that Quentin Tarantino changed movie making. PTA didn't. He is important, but Quentin Tarantino and Pulp Fiction specifically defined the 90s for movies.
Absolutely.
And there's not really, like, we do this thing on the Patreon where all of our fans at the general level get to jump in this like private chat right before we tape. There was 10 of them, and I asked each one of them, what's your favorite Tarantino movie? And most of them, it was Pulp Fiction, because it's almost an impossible movie to beat.
It's actually become, it has been since I guess I was a teenager, my default answer for what is your favorite movie of all time. I feel like actually this week was the first time I may have actually given a different answer for that question.
What was the answer?
And I may have said Heat, but I think I've just been caught up in the heat of the moment with the Michael Mann podcast and whatnot.
That movie's amazing.
Yes, but Pulp Fiction definitely, it practically defined my childhood. It's one reason why I wanted to become a writer. I can't actually remember seeing it. Do you remember the first time you saw Pulp Fiction?
No. So growing up, my older brother is 30. He just turned 40.
Oh, okay.
And in my family, they were all about letting me watch whatever they watched.
Yeah.
So when I was like 7, I watched Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction back to back. So we listened to the soundtrack for Pulp Fiction on road trips as a kid. I know every song like the back of my hand. The whole essence of that movie defined my childhood. I don't really remember watching it, to be honest.
I was Mira Jeff on Ain't It Cool News. That was like my first screen name as a teenager.
Mira Jeff?
Yeah, because of Miramax.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so they had made Scream, The Crow, and Pulp Fiction, which were my 3 favorite movies at the time. But it's like I remember watching Reservoir Dogs, like with my middle school buddies. I remember going to see Jackie Brown in theaters when I was 13 or whatever. But I can't actually recall the first time I watched Pulp Fiction or how it blew my little 10 or 11-year-old brain or whatever. But yeah, it was a totally different way of telling stories.
Yeah, it was my older brother's favorite movie, and again, like you talk about iconic. It's one of those moments in time. You talk about movies that have defined an era where they mean so much more than the actual movie that they are in some ways. Like it's just something about being a moment in time. And I think Pulp Fiction is one of those movies. And the weirdest part is the movie that won Best Picture that year is arguably the other movie. Like Forrest Gump beat it at the Oscars that year. And Forrest Gump is as quoted by people that have never seen the movie as it is by people that love the movie, which is insane that they came out at the same time. I think Pulp Fiction has stood the test of time in a different kind of way.
Absolutely. I mean, Forrest Gump has a lot of haters these days, which I think is unfair.
It's a great movie.
Yeah, I have no problems with Forrest Gump, but yeah, Pulp Fiction has definitely aged better. I think the way that it told its story in a nonlinear fashion broke my brain, and that is sort of part of the allure is, you know, the structure of this film and how unusual it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the nonlinear storytelling became what's the movie that was made just a couple years later with Eric Stoltz that's like
4 Rooms or
no,
Killing Zoe?
Killing Zoe, that's the one. Yeah, and I remember there's all those crime movies in the 90s. They all want to have these fast-talking hitmen. They all want to have these like really cool, relatable criminals, and that became a trope. That became a thing that so many people have done.
He started his own genre, same as like J-horror or found footage. I mean, Tarantino-esque became an adjective. I think I read an interview with him recently where he said he became an adjective sooner than he thought he would.
Yes. Now, gift and a curse in some ways, because we'll talk about it a little bit when you're criticizing some of the weaker parts of his films, and I actually think that the fact that he's leaned in so much to that is kind of a problem with some of his worst movies. But the other guy on the other side of this, and we're not just talking about Pulp Fiction and just Tarantino, is Paul Thomas Anderson, whose debut film, Hard Eight, originally called Sydney, came out in 1996. So 4 years after Tarantino's official debut, because he has that. I've never seen it. Have you ever seen My Best Friend's Birthday? You ever tracked it down?
I don't know. I think I've seen some YouTube clips, maybe.
Yeah, it was like nobody's ever watched that movie. His debut was Reservoir Dogs. But Hard Eight comes out, and it's okay. He lost control of that movie to the studio. He had a really good cast. And then he, of course, makes Boogie Nights the next year. And it's amazing. Boogie Nights is my favorite PTA movie. I don't think he's ever made something as good.
I'm a big Magnolia guy. I think Magnolia may be a masterpiece, but it's certainly not as much fun as Boogie Nights is.
My number 1 favorite movie of all time is Warrior. Number 2, Point Break. Number 3, Boogie Nights.
Okay.
Number 4, Magnolia.
Boogie Nights is the first thing you see when you walk into my apartment. I love that movie, and I think that kind of back-to-back, like Boogie Nights and Magnolia back-to-back, that is...
Well, don't
like
they feel kind
like
of...
two towers.
In your mind, don't they feel like they're connected? They're like the same movie in some way. Different stories, but like they're this moment in time, the same actors,
yes.
the same feel.
The same near like geography, too. I mean, obviously very close to each other. I love it. I love that ensemble style, and I wish that he would actually return to that kind of filmmaking.
Well, they have this energy, those 2 movies specifically, that like other movies he did lost. It was like, because I'm not the biggest Punch Drunk Love fan. I think it's good. I think it's an interesting movie, but it's just kind of a weird, quirky, like, it's a whatever movie to me. And There Will Be Blood is such a different attempt of it. It's such a different kind of movie. It takes itself so seriously compared to those movies. Those 2 films have all these moments between their characters that like... They like make my like fucking face light up when I watch them, because like Dirk meeting Reed at the pool is like the kind of humor you don't really get in the later films. It's just so wonderful, you know?
I think both these filmmakers have great senses of humor, and they're not exactly known as comedy directors, but yeah, they write really funny dialogue, and just they're great observers of human behavior.
Right, absolutely. And so we're going to kind of go down the list here in a little bit, talk about some of their achievements. Looking at their accolades here, it is interesting talking about the Oscars. That's one thing that I'm fascinated by, is the way the Academy views these guys. They're not viewed in the same way that like a Scorsese or a Spielberg is. It's a completely different animal. It's like they have to work harder for their credit or something like that. The kind of movies that they make. I mean, we'll talk about this in just a second. But before we get into the whole big part of the show, I do want to remind everybody you can follow along with the 2 of us on social media. Jeff, where can the folks find you?
At the InSneider on Twitter, Instagram, and Cameo.
And Cameo, is that a thing?
That's right.
People do that now?
Well, select people do it, Ben.
What is Cameo?
That's where people can pay me, and I will record a private video message for them. I can congratulate them on, you know, whatever accomplishment, wish them a happy birthday, cheer them up if they're feeling sad, or just talk smack. They could be like, "Oh, I can't stand Ben Bateman. What do you think about his chances against Kalinowski?" And I could tape a little video for them.
Look at that. Cameo. I've seen people do it. I didn't realize that you had to be at the Jeff Sneider level to have Cameo.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I think I may be like the cheapest person on Cameo. Okay. I'm like definitely the least famous person that they could find.
Something to aspire to, I guess.
Well, maybe John Roca might actually be there.
If John Roca gets at least one butt of the joke mentioned in every episode of this podcast. Well, he was a guest while I was out of town. He actually he was in this room, and he and Andrew didn't kill each other, so it was impressive. But you guys can follow along with me personally at Ben Bateman Media, Twitter and Instagram, Team Action Show on Twitter, and then Action Industries all over. We have a YouTube that's been growing. We do live streams 3 times a week there, as well as full episodes of this show. And I'm playing covers now. It's a thing I started doing again.
You know what? I'm going to admit that I watched you sing.
Did you really?
And I hate that you can sing.
You the other day, the thing I just posted?
Yeah, I did. I watched you on guitar. You were good.
Thank you. That was the first time I had played anything in 5 years.
Yeah, I was jealous.
That's wonderful that you did that. I didn't think you would have. Jeff Sneider, guys, doesn't watch the action guys. Watches me.
I'll never admit it. But
the truth is, he was hoping.
The only time.
He was hoping I was terrible, and that he wasn't going to tell me. He still might think it, but he's nice enough to pretend. So, we're going to continue through this conversation here. So, Paul Thomas Anderson, he's made 8 movies. Quentin Tarantino's made 10. That's the comparison there. The weird thing is,
we only call it 9 for some reason. Like everyone is like, have you noticed this in the media with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood coming out?
Oh, like people don't acknowledge it yet?
Well, we're counting Kill Bill as one film. That's what they're doing.
What?
I mean, which is fine. I can go along with that, but let's.
It's 2 movies. They came out a year apart. They're fully different movies.
Exactly.
Are you a Kill Bill guy?
I am actually. Yeah. More 1 than 2.
Yeah, okay. That's
more 1 than 2.
I used to like 2 more when I was a kid. I'll explain this whole thing. I didn't talk about it in the other show, but 8 films versus 10. The debut film obviously being Hard 8 versus Reservoir Dogs. Oscar nominations, you've got 8 nominations for Paul Thomas Anderson, so 4 for writing, 2 directing, 2 producing. And then over on Tarantino's side, he's got 5 Oscar noms, right? 3 for writing, 2 directing, but he's won twice for writing. Going all the way back to Pulp Fiction, which of course is... 94 is the weirdest year ever. It's like hard to imagine that he would only win the 1 Oscar for that movie. But again, it was such a crazy year. And then, of course, the nominated performances. That's where I think you really get into the interesting part of this conversation because stylistically and artistically, like you can just have an opinion. Like whose stuff do you like better? Who's writing, the tone of their whatever.
Right.
But you talk about the actors in their movies and the kind of performances they're able to get out of this talent, and that's where it gets kind of in like a different space. And so there's 8 nominations. Performances and 1 win by PTA. His most famous performance being Daniel Plainview in There Will Be Blood, played by the greatest actor of the generation. So there you go. And then you have 7 nominations over for Tarantino. Now, they both have 1 movie with 3 nominations. Pulp Fiction's got 3, and The Master has 3.
Okay.
We'll get into who we think is the better director for performances, but pretty impressive resumes there.
Of course, I mean, two of the greatest resumes, but I just, I don't really, the whole nominations thing, to me, it's all about who you're up against, right? That's what a nomination is. It's weighing you against the other movies that were released that year. So, if one of them has a few more nominations or, movies that have had multiple nominations, I don't put that much stock in it.
I mean, okay, but like, are the Rockets invalidated because Jordan wasn't playing? I mean, there's just things like, time is time.
No, I'm not invalidating any of it. I'm just saying I think that you need to look at each movie and the way that it performed awards-wise in the context of the other films it was up against.
That's fair. I mean, but again, they've both been
There
big
Will Be
movies.
Blood could have won a ton more Oscars if it didn't happen to be in the same year against New Country for Old Men.
Yeah. 2007, one of the legendary years ever, right?
Right. But the 2 of those movies. Kind of linked all season long, trading blows back and forth.
Yeah, and then it's crazy when you look back now that Zodiac didn't get really any attention, and Michael Clayton got Michael Clayton got steamrolled, which is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Boring.
Yeah, you don't like Michael Clayton?
Nope, not a Michael Clayton fan.
What?
That's right.
That's like a thing in the movie community, right? Like people have their opinions on certain movies.
I don't know. Tony Gilroy never really did it for me.
Huh. That's like his best, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I don't think it's like a bad movie, but
I
don't get the line to kiss its ass.
What's the movie that everybody else loves that you hate that's not that one? Or conversely, what's the one that you love that everyone hates?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that question.
You don't have the unpopular opinion where you're like, oh, I love this movie. People are like, that's a garbage movie, Jeff.
No.
Wow.
I mean, listen, there are plenty of movies I think are garbage movies that I love that people will think are garbage movies, but I just I need a list.
If it comes up later in conversation.
Sounds good.
All right, so let's go down this list here. We have a few different things to talk about. We're going to be talking top performance, best movie, most unique movie, most iconic scene, best writer, better of the 2 right now in 2019. Best recurring performers, that's like the ensemble people they constantly are reusing. And then finally, who is the most overrated? Because these guys are 2 hyped filmmakers, so it's easy to have an opinion.
All right,
and
I'm ready to do it.
And finally, you're going to have to decide on your top 3 from the director, each of them, and which one, if you had to push delete from existence, you'd have a harder time doing.
Yep.
And that's going to be the full show.
I'm ready to rock and roll. Let's do it.
Let's drop in a top performance. What do you got?
All right. I think the top performance out of all the performances in both of these guys' movies, it's hard not to say Daniel Day-Lewis for Daniel Plainview.
It's amazing. Great performance.
Right? Like, how do you choose against that? It may not necessarily be my favorite or the most rewatchable, the one I go back to, but it really is just a towering, staggering achievement that is one of the all-time great movie performances, I think.
The drool. The drool itself deserved an Oscar.
Everything. There's a reason why he is considered the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Right?
Agreed.
So I think that is the answer for this. What do you have as the greatest performance?
Oh man, there's so many good ones. I think I had
I have a little mini list here, but
I had 4 that came to mind.
Go ahead.
I go Philip Seymour Hoffman in The Master, which I am obsessed with that performance.
Mm-hmm.
I go Plainview.
Yep.
I go Christoph Waltz as Hans Landa.
Yep.
And finally, the one that I lean into the hardest because I think it's the most unique for his career, and that is Tom Cruise in Magnolia.
Yeah. So that was basically the acting list that I had. It was Daniel Day-Lewis, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and Joaquin, and Cruise for PTA, and then Waltz was at the top of the Tarantino list, followed by Travolta and Sam Jackson, obviously.
Yeah.
I love Pam Grier and Robert Forster and Jackie Brown.
Terrific, yeah, both.
And really, when you think, this is really one of the great performances, I think, of all time, and she does not get the credit that she deserves. Uma Thurman in Kill Bill is unbelievable.
Such a physical performance too.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's incredible. On rewatch, so I grew up watching Tarantino, I mentioned, and I think of the first 3 movies as their own like little ecosystem because
they are.
By the time Kill Bill came out, there was this expectation and this hype, and he changed genres.
Right, we knew what a Tarantino film was at that point.
And in 2001, I was 13 years old. So because Kill Bill came out in 2003, if I remember correctly, right? It's 03, 04, I think.
Mm-hmm. I was in college.
Yeah, and so when that movie was like announced and it was in production and people were talking about it, like I was like 13, 14, kind of going into high school age. And so I remember when Kill Bill comes out, and I remember just like seeing it, and like, I mean, I just don't care. Like, this is not what I want to see out of a Tarantino. I was too young to understand the difference.
Mm-hmm.
I had such a weighted expectation. And Kill Bill 2 came out, and it's a little more dialogue heavy, so I kind of bought into it a little more. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the Death Proof run happens, and I was like, this guy sucks. It's like, he isn't the guy that I thought I was getting when now I'm old enough to appreciate his movies, which is then like Bastards becomes the next.
Those movies almost became like exercises. You know, like, I don't think that Quentin has made a bad movie, and I think that Paul has, which I think is the difference between them as filmmakers. That's fair. But I can get where you're coming from as just maybe not being a fan of Death Proof or on that film's wavelength.
This is controversial, I'm going to say Cruise is my vote, and it's because of the depth that he had to go to for that character versus the rest of his career. He never has done anything like that character before. He's never gone back to it. Mm-hmm. He's been so careful about the roles he's taken since about 2004, whereas I kind of in some ways feel like Plainview is just actually the same character as Gangs of New York. Uh-huh. It's similar.
Well, it's like how much credit do you give PTA for the Plainview performance, for the Day-Lewis performance, because he is the greatest of all time?
Yeah.
I mean, it almost is more of an accomplishment to, first of all, convince Tom Cruise to play that character, to go against his wholesome, blockbuster image, and then to get that kind of performance out of him that no one else has gotten to this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, Cruise, so you probably have, if you love Magnolia, you probably know some of this.
I would vote for Tom Cruise for president tomorrow.
Yeah, biggest fan.
Yeah, number one.
Cruise came in and created a lot of that character. He knew what he was going to do, and PTA was like, this is the character. Cruise was like, I want to do the wrist cuffs, and I have this idea for this vest and the hair. And so the stuff in that Cruise performance because obviously the big scene with Robards is an incredible scene. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. And when you rewatch it, he is working so hard, but it's also so much of his own life comes into it. But the stuff that I love the most in that is after he's in the interview and he comes back out and he's got that scene on stage. He's like, turn to page 17, your blue booklets, and he's talking to the audience, but he's also having that internal struggle. Right. And he flips the table. That's the scene to me that every time I watch that movie, I'm like, jaw drop.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that one.
Wait, I'm sorry. The other one that I didn't write down. Oh God, is this even better? Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm changing my vote. I can't believe I forgot this. It's Julianne Moore in Magnolia. That's the number one. It's my favorite of all.
She's fantastic in both Magnolia and Boogie Nights. We're going to talk about sort of the recurring performers that these guys like to employ. Julianne Moore, at the top of that list, basically.
I can't believe I didn't write it down. That's my favorite. It's my number one. And I love that Cruise performance more than... But That's my favorite thing I've ever seen her do. She has scenes in that movie, in the pharmacy, in the lawyer's office.
She's great. Dude, John C. Reilly in that movie's great.
Ugh.
There's just Philip Baker Hall. There's a lot of great stuff in Magnolia. But, yeah, I think that just on performance alone, Daniel Day-Lewis as Daniel Plainview cannot be argued with. But do we give that credit to Daniel Day-Lewis, and should we give more credit to someone else?
Impressive that both of us we're arguing over which of the Philip Seymour Hoffman or which of the Paul Thomas Anderson performances, because they're all PSH, the ones that we're arguing, right? Or sorry, mixing up the letters. Paul Thomas Anderson.
A lot of letters.
Yeah.
PTA, PSH, DDL, QT.
All right, so I go Julianne Moore, and you go Daniel Plainview. So there's our votes.
Yeah.
Moving on next to best movie.
The best movie. Oof, man, this is tough. I think I gotta go Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
I think that's the answer.
I love Boogie Nights so much, but I have to go Pulp Fiction because I don't think Boogie Nights is like it's that movie that like you champion if you love it and you explain it to people. When I think about some of the scenes in Pulp Fiction, some of the moments in the movie, they've become like engraved in stone in my mind. Like there's nothing like
Does
them.
Boogie Nights happen without Pulp Fiction?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Does a young Paul Thomas Anderson see Pulp Fiction, and that is what inspires him to do this sprawling, epic ensemble sort of thing?
Oh, I think so. Because, I mean, he's already pretty well into his journey at the time that Pulp Fiction comes out. So, I mean, maybe he sees it and he's like, I'm going to write this movie. But he had done the Dirk Diggler story. He had done the short in college. So he already had that story. He wanted to do the bigger version.
I mean, you can ask me this on any given day. I'll give you a different answer. Pulp Fiction has just sort of been the default. But I really do love Jackie Brown. Jackie Brown, you asked me at the right time, and I could say Jackie Brown's the best movie. In terms of... So let's just say Pulp Fiction is Tarantino's best. What are you saying is Paul's best?
I say Boogie Nights because There Will Be Blood you have to work to enjoy more. Boogie Nights is like laughable fun. The performances are incredible. The story is unique. The humor is unbelievable. The drug deal got bad scene is like
I think I would go Boogie Nights over Magnolia too, and so then it becomes like a sort of tournament, Pulp Fiction versus Boogie Nights, and I'd have to give the edge to Pulp.
I give the edge to Pulp, and I think we'll skip this next one here. We'll come back to it because it connects here for me, and that is most iconic scene, which is where for me Pulp Fiction gets the nod, because I think, and this is what we talked about on the chat just a second ago, but I feel like the slow turn, and I will strike down with great vengeance and furious anger when you see Jules turn, that look in his eyes, because it's used in every montage when you're talking about Tarantino. I think that the Big Kahuna Burger scene in itself is the most iconic scene. You could argue the dancing. And you also could argue the needle and the wake up. All of those qualify. But I think that all three of those are more iconic than almost anything else done in any other movie on either list.
Yes. I'm with you on that.
You agree?
So in terms of iconic scenes for Paul Thomas Anderson, I put the end of There Will Be Blood.
I'm finished.
With the bowling alley and everything. I put the drug scene in
Boogie
Nights. I love the end of Boogie Nights, actually, when the music gets real serious and Mark Wahlberg's getting the crap kicked out of him and Don Cheadle's at the donut store. Like, I love the cross-cutting on that ending and everything,
And the Roller Girl stuff with the guy.
I love anything with Frank T.J. Mackey. And I also love the scene where the boy genius pees his pants on stage.
It's incredible.
So like those are like my favorite PTA scenes, and I think just objectively you can't really compare any of those with any of those three Pulp Fiction scenes.
Yeah. I'm a big fan. I mean, again, there's so many, but when you talk Magnolia, I love when John C. Reilly goes out to dinner with Melora Walters, and she's all coked out, and she's like, "You're so put together," and he's like, "I lost my gun today. I lost my gun today, and I'm a fool. I'm an idiot." It's like that's just so authentic. He's so good in that scene. But yeah, in terms of iconic, like memorable, one when you talk to somebody that they remember, it's weird that the opening to Inglourious is not what we're talking about right now. Because that
was on the list for me for Quentin.
So I just reviewed that movie on Action Movie Anatomy today, and I watched it last night for the first time since theaters. I hadn't seen it in 10 years.
Oh wow!
I'd only seen it the one time, and I did remember the opening. I remembered it was amazing.
It's incredible.
But on rewatch, the movie's way more compelling than I remember, and that scene is more impressive to me now than it was then because of how many more movies I've watched in the last 10 years. It's masterful. There's so many moments.
There's just such control. I also love the drinking game in Inglourious Basterds.
Yeah, really good.
I love the that first fight with Vivica A. Fox in Kill Bill. I think is great.
Yeah.
I love the Madonna, like the coffee table scene at the beginning of Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah.
And I like his story when he's telling the story about the dog in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, God, there's just so much.
Isn't it, you need a commode? Is that what he's saying it's called?
Yeah, the commode
No,
story.
he's talking what you need. What's the name of a fake story, like an amusing anecdote? Isn't they call it a commode?
Yeah. Well, the commode's the bathroom, but
No, but they refer to the story as something.
maybe it's the commode story. I don't know.
or something. I can't remember what he calls it. But I for the longest time when I was growing up, like, you know, until I was in my teens, probably until Inglourious Basterds came out and Tarantino rebirthed, sort of. I would always tell people that Reservoir Dogs is my favorite because it always has felt more raw than Pulp Fiction. It's so much less polished, but it's also just a direct ripoff of another movie in a lot of ways. There's a lot of the scenes are just straight up like shot for shot, right? So I don't know. I've always loved Reservoir Dogs.
I love the end mall scene in Jackie Brown too, when you
really?
get that music, that doot doot doot.
Yeah.
Dun-dun.
Yeah. It's also, that movie's also interesting, Jackie Brown, because the cast is so like of its time Tarantino. It's like he hasn't started experimenting with like other like really big mainstream like Brad Pitts and DiCaprio's and guys like that. It's like De Niro and you got Sam Jackson and you got like
Chris
Robert
Tucker.
Forster. Yeah. It's a great movie. But I would say for most iconic scene, I think my vote's got to go. I think my vote has to go to the Big Kahuna Burger scene. I think that's my vote.
I think most iconic scene for me may be the dance scene.
Yeah.
I think it's John and Uma.
That scene again, it's another one on rewatch when we covered that movie last year where I was like, man, is there anything cooler than what I'm watching? Like, is this is like he just like resurrected John Travolta. He's like, hey, all the things that made you really cool back in the day, not only are you gonna be like a hitman, have a comeback, but I'm gonna give you a dance scene.
It's just like, what image do you associate Pulp Fiction with most? Is it, you know, Travolta and Sam Jackson with the guns pointed together? Oh, yeah, I think it is the dance stuff.
It's close.
And it's just different. You know, that such a violent movie is remembered for kind of such a sweet dancing scene.
Yeah,
you know?
It's totally. Yeah, there's a lot of iconic scenes. So next up, we got most unique movie.
This is okay. I've got it. I want to hear yours first.
Okay, so, I mean, unique in a good way or unique in a bad way, right?
I just put unique either way.
In any way. Yeah, I think probably if I had to just today vote most unique movie, I mean, I can't vote on Inherent Vice because I've never seen it. It's the only one I've never seen off the whole list.
You don't need to.
I've heard it's
awful.
a giant pile of crap.
It is.
I would probably vote for Magnolia because it's so long, the ending is so weird, and it's such a like the story you're telling is not like something really, really like. If you pitch me Boogie Nights, I can understand what the pitch is. I'm like, okay, I get why that's funny. I get it's quirky. It's the porn business. You got all the stuff. You pitch me Magnolia, I'm like, so what? All these like weird characters that are super strange together in a 3-hour movie in Los Angeles that ends with frogs raining. Why am I going to give you money to make that movie?
That is pretty unique.
Yeah,
maybe I should have picked that.
There's nothing about that movie that's sellable. It's like, oh, and it's at the beginning. There's these weird coincidences we're going to do this really cool like sequence of. They don't really have anything to do with the rest of the movie very much.
I feel like maybe I just interpreted unique as in a different kind of way, or where it was just like only this filmmaker could have made this film at this time.
Okay.
And, I put The Master. I think The Master is the most unique of all these movies that we're talking about. It just seems like a wholly singular vision to me. I don't know. It is tricky to describe. I mean, that movie. It's not one of my favorite movies. I'm not even that big a fan. It's not one I really go back and rewatch. But in terms of its uniqueness with the score and everything, and what I think it was trying to accomplish, and sort of the rules it had to play by, yeah, I think that was pretty unique.
I mean, I think The Master is a fascinating movie. Of every movie on this list, it's probably the most misunderstood.
It's challenging
because I think that the most people disliked it. Andrew Guy, my co-host on this show, who's the biggest PSH fan and PTA fan, really dislikes that movie.
Yeah.
It took me years to see it.
It's not a fun one.
And he was my favorite director at the time that movie came out. He kind of fell out of favor with me. I skipped it because I just didn't care. It was only last year that I went to watch it. And the funny part about that movie is I watched it, and it ended, and I was like, that was challenging to get through. I don't know if I really liked it. And then over the course of the next 4 days, I kept going back and rewatching scenes. And then by 4 days later, I was like, that movie was amazing. Like the performances in that movie alone, because if you were to pitch me that movie, would you say this is a loose retelling of the origin of L. Ron Hubbard? It's not totally accurate.
That's what we were all seeing the movie as like this Scientology movie where they weren't allowed to call it Scientology.
Yeah, and you'd be like, but it's not totally that. And Joaquin Phoenix is this like kind of weird, crazy, misunderstood character that's basically at odds with L. Ron the whole movie, and it's their battle of sort of faith and understanding of one another. And that's basically what the movie is. And like, okay, like you've got me enough. You can make that movie. People will probably see this, you know?
Yeah. Again, not a favorite of mine, but to me, it's kind of like The Fountain in that regard.
Right.
I think Aronofsky is sort of a piece with these guys. I love Aronofsky's work, and yeah, The Master is kind of like PTA's The Fountain.
Yeah, it's also strange. That's the last great Philip Seymour Hoffman role, right? Because I think he dies in like 2014 or something like that. 2013.
I'm not sure when was before The Devil Knows You're Dead.
That's like 07 maybe.
Okay, I don't even know.
His big like Oscar run when he was like acknowledged all of a sudden was like Capote before The Devil Knows You're Dead, Doubt, Charlie Wilson's War. Like those are all the big Oscar movies from like 05 to like 08. And then he had a slower year or two, and then he does The Master in 2011. I want to say he's in like 2 or 3 other movies, but I think that's his last great movie.
The Master is his last great movie.
Yeah, because he's like a most interesting man or a most wanted man or something. I never said God's Pocket. Some pretty bad movies. But next up on the list, we got Best Writer. Now you yourself are a writer. You mentioned earlier on the show that was what you came out here to do.
Yes.
So was when you were writing your first drafts of things, was that like Tarantino? You just sort of like that's my hero, basically?
No, I definitely was. I'm pretty arrogant, but not arrogant enough to think that I could ever write like Quentin Tarantino. So I think I wouldn't even try, and it's foolish for anyone to try. That's why you see so many people trying to ape his style, and it just doesn't go well.
Right.
I think Tarantino is the answer for me on this. I think he's wholly unique. I just think both these guys are kind of up their own ass in a way, and a little bit, but I like what's up Quentin's ass, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like,
it's fair.
Like I just like his sensibilities and all the movies that have sort of that he consumed as a younger man that sort of, you know, are in his DNA now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Paul Thomas Anderson, some of the last few films have kind of left me scratching my head. I mean, I liked Phantom Thread. I think I respected it more than I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just not an Inherent Vice guy. And it's stuff like that just makes me wonder, like, what is Paul Thomas Anderson doing right now? What is he working on right now?
Well, so Inherent Vice, like I said, is the only one I've never seen. It's on my list of 100 movies this year to watch because I just can't bring myself to do it because it's the responses to it and even just the trailer is just
I hated it.
That's what I hear. It's just slow and weird and doesn't make any sense. Or
yeah, basically. I just didn't care. I didn't care about any of it.
Great actors.
That was a mess.
So my answer to this is PTA, and I can explain why. And this is what I was alluding to at the beginning when I talked about style and how in some ways it's actually been a hindrance to some of what Tarantino's done. So from a dialogue perspective, you're going to be hard-pressed to ever show me somebody who writes better dialogue than Quentin Tarantino. On the whole, if you look at his whole career, the best conversations, stuff like that opening scene in Inglourious Basterds, a lot of the stuff in Pulp Fiction, simple stuff that seems so natural. Jules and Vincent, okay, let's get into character. Lines like that where you're like, the idea that you came up with, like a hitman would say that to another hitman just before they go in, these are just guys. Mm-hmm. I love stuff like that. It resonates. It's great. The issue I have with Quentin Tarantino is the fact that, so I've watched half of The Hateful Eight. I've tried. It's on my 100. I can't move forward until I finish it, and I can't stand it. I hate it. And what's going on when I'm watching is I'm thinking, first of all these characters sound exactly the same. They sound like every other character in every other Tarantino movie with the characters trying to sound cool. Secondly, they're all played by the same actors that played all those characters. And not only that, but this movie is going to be 3 hours long of these guys in a cabin doing this. Oh, yeah, and also Kurt Russell's just going to use the N-word every 45 seconds because, like, it's necessary, I guess. And I just found myself watching the movie being like, the gimmick's a little stale. I'm having a really hard time with this. I don't enjoy this. This feels like you're so far up your own ass. Like you have lost me as a viewer.
I mean, I won't argue with that. I think, like I said, I don't think that Quentin has made a bad movie per se, but I think that The Hateful Eight is his worst movie.
Oh, okay, you agree?
Yeah, I don't think it's
Some
death-proof.
people love that movie.
No, Hateful Eight is a stage play that really is not very cinematic at all. It's just people talking in a room. it read way better on the page than I think that it played. The whole mystery of like Channing Tatum like hiding. You didn't even get to Channing Tatum.
I was like, you
only watch half the movie. Yeah, it's definitely not my favorite.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think the other thing I alluded to just here with Russell's character is like, because there's that famous story on Crimson Tide where Tarantino, he punched up the script and that he's on set and he's just like mouthing off about this, about that, and the lines, and he's using the N-word a lot because I think it's in somewhere in the script of the notes, and Denzel just called him out and was like, why do you think it's okay for you to say that word? And he's like, basically like, because I'm doing this, and he's like, why do you think it's okay for you to be writing it over and over again and saying it loudly? Like, and I guess they came to the end of that conversation, but like, there is an issue that I have with the idea that even though you're into blaxploitation, even though like you're a great writer, and I understand that it's in the context of what you're writing, there is just this redundancy of that. It's a lot of his movies. And at a certain point, I just found it in Hateful Eight to be like, I don't really know if I need to watch this much more of this. So that's like the knock I have.
I mean, Hateful Eight is like the that and Django are like the two movies where it's allowed.
Right,
like,
but
it's
it
historically
still kind of comes up in a lot of the other movies
like,
too.
Well, I mean, it does obviously, and I won't really argue with anyone who thinks its usage is gratuitous.
Yeah,
but I don't think that he says it just because he can get away with saying it or for the sheer thrill of it.
Me neither. And he's a great writer, and I think he's a smart writer.
And I think he's allowed to say it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's allowed to write it. Yeah.
For sure. I'm not saying that in the instances that it works, it's bad for the movie it works in. I'm just talking about when I look at his writing on the whole, and I'm thinking about whose writing do I enjoy more, or who do I find is like at times gimmicky, or at times I find myself annoyed by. The hallmarks of Tarantino's movies, they're very repetitive in what they do, and that's one of the things that's repetitive. So it didn't bother me in the instances that I thought it worked. But in this last movie, it was like, what am I watching? Not just for that reason, but for the reason that I don't want all my characters to be so clever and all of them to sound exactly the same.
That's a fair complaint. And Sam Jackson is playing like a character of repute in that movie. Like he's like a general, isn't he?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, like he has some respect. He's got some stripes on his shoulders, I feel like.
Yeah.
So maybe it is weird, sort of, when it's being lobbed like that. Like, I mean, Django is,
it's of the time, and that's
right.
What it is.
That's what the whole movie is. But in like movies like Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction, like, does anybody get called the N-word, or is it just sort of peppered in throughout speech?
Well,
you know what I mean?
And again, when you're talking about, like, I don't mean to stand on a pedestal and say that like it's an inappropriate thing for a white writer to write. That's not what I mean at all.
Right.
I think what I'm talking about is the redundancy of gimmick and why it gets frustrating. But I also find, like...
I get that.
Sorry, I just lost my train of thought here. Going back to those old films, like the early ones, it's not lobbed at anybody, but it's still a choice. It's still a choice to have your characters go down that road. And real people are pieces of shit in real life. So some gross crime guy who's like does illegal things and kills people for a living is probably not the best human being. He's probably kind of a racist. Mm-hmm. Like, that probably happens. You know? It's okay for these characters to say it.
Has anybody ever said it in a Paul Thomas Anderson movie? I don't think
so. You know, it's possible, but not one that comes to mind right off the bat.
Okay.
There might be like a Hard Eight character, because like I feel like maybe Sam Jackson probably in Hard Eight probably does.
Probably. Sam Jackson, he's probably saying it.
He's pretty. I mean, in Hard Eight, Sam Jackson's kind of just like doing the Sam Jackson thing.
I don't know.
It's not really used all that well. So the better writer of the two, I go PTA for the reason that I like stuff like Phantom Thread or The Master. The instances in those movies feels like very believable and unique. Like that scene when he's doing the assessment with Freddy, and he's like, "You have to not blink," right? And he slaps him. Mm-hmm. Scenes like that, I really enjoy the writing and stuff like that, because it doesn't feel as much like I'm watching comic book characters, which is like some of those clever scenes in a Tarantino film. They do feel like these are cartoon characters with like thought bubbles. And they're like really, really so articulate that they could talk that way.
I don't know. I love Quentin's dialogue, obviously. His character work. I don't know. I can distinguish a Tarantino script more than I can a Paul Thomas Anderson script. Like if you took away the cover page from their scripts, I could be like, oh, Quentin wrote this one. Right. I don't know. Who wrote this? Tell me.
Right. I mean, like Tarantino is in the same vein as like a Mamet or like a Shane Black, where like you just read their writing, you're like, oh yeah, I know who wrote this. Like this is you give me 10 pages and I could pretty much figure this out.
Right. It's almost like a movie-going experience in and of itself is reading a Tarantino script. You feel like you're there and you can see what he sees in his head. I don't know. I've only maybe read one or two Paul Thomas Anderson scripts.
Interesting.
And only one before, I actually got a chance to see the movie, so I didn't have those images preformed in my head. Again, Paul Thomas Anderson is a great writer, but we're talking about Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah. It's Tarantino.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, PTA has 2 nominations for writing. Never won. Tarantino's won twice.
I couldn't believe he's never won an Oscar. That was surprising when you told me that.
PTA?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I figured Blood would have won one because that's original and No Country was adapted. No. It was Upton Sinclair, Oil. Sorry, it was adapted. That's why it was up against No Country for Old Men.
And No Country got the win.
It didn't even win that.
Cormac McCarthy, right?
One, yeah.
Yeah. I rewatched that recently, by the way. No Country. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. That movie's so good. That movie's crazy good. I've only ever watched There Will Be Blood once in theaters. I've never gone back to rewatch it.
I've seen it a couple times.
Yeah, it's pretty long, right?
I think No Country has aged better. It probably did deserve that Oscar, but I remember at the time back then thinking There Will Be Blood was robbed. Because I did not love the end of No Country.
Plainview probably uses
and the end of There Will Be Blood was so good.
Plainview probably uses the N-word. I feel like he probably does. That seems like a Plainview thing that would have happened in that movie.
Maybe. I don't know.
I'd have to go back and rewatch. All right, so that's Best Writer. I'm gonna vote PTA. You're gonna go Tarantino.
Yep.
Who's better right now, 2019?
I think it has to be Tarantino. Just look at the sensation for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Obviously, it has the benefit of Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio and these big these big A-list stars. Plus, we're here in Hollywood. We can feel that buzz, and the movie's about Hollywood. So, it's not exactly fair. I don't know if people in Boston, like my brothers or my high school buddies, are buzzing right now, being like, "Oh, this weekend the new Tarantino film comes out. Can't wait." But I can feel that here in this city.
Are you gonna write something about it after you see it tonight?
No, I think I may be doing the video review tomorrow though for Collider. But his movies are just kind of events and. Again, I liked Phantom Thread a lot. I didn't feel that it was the same kind of event as a Tarantino movie. I think Inherent Vice really hurt Paul Thomas Anderson.
I mean, look, I'm going to be completely honest. I classically, PTA was my favorite director. And I didn't see The Master when it came out because in 2011 it was like a non-kind of movie-going period of my life. I started really watching movies again in 2014. I didn't watch Inherent Vice. It looked awful, and I heard awful things about it. And when Phantom Thread came out, I finally watched it, but I watched it on an airplane. I watched it 6 months after Oscar season because I couldn't get myself to watch it. Mm-hmm. They aren't events in the same way. They just aren't. They could have been. There Will Be Blood made you sort of think they were going to start to be.
Event.
But not the same thing even in the slightest.
And again, you're armed with the greatest actor in the world, so to speak.
All you're doing is going to watch Daniel Day-Lewis D-Day-Lou for a little while.
Right, exactly. He kind of becomes the attraction. Whereas even when Quentin has Leo and Brad tonight, I'm not going to see the new Leo DiCaprio movie tonight. I'm not going to see the new Brad Pitt movie tonight. I'm going to see the new Quentin Tarantino movie. I think that sort of tells you everything you need to know here in 2019.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. Pretty excited. I haven't been this excited about a screening in a little while.
This next question was the toughest for me.
Really?
Yeah.
So the next question here is better recurring performers. And so what we mean by that is when you watch these guys full canon, there's these actors they constantly go back to, and they reuse the same people. And it's not like it's always been that way because DiCaprio and Brad Pitt were part of the second half. But ultimately, there's a lot of these character actors that they reuse a lot. And this one's extremely difficult. Do you have a vote?
I mean, so we're talking about Sam Jackson, Uma Thurman, Kurt Russell, Tim Roth, Michael Madsen, Christoph Waltz, Leo, and Brad for Quentin. Those are the people who've been in multiple movies.
Yeah, we're not missing any?
I'm sure we're missing a few, bit parts here and there.
Right.
With PTA, we're talking about Philip Seymour Hoffman, Joaquin Phoenix, Daniel Day-Lewis, Ricky Jay, Julianne Moore, Luis Guzman, John C. Reilly. For the most part. I'm sure there's some others.
Yeah. It's fair.
So that is tough. I mean, when you have Daniel Day-Lewis, Joaquin Phoenix, and Philip Seymour Hoffman, those are three of the greatest actors of all time.
Yeah.
It's tough to put them up against Leo, Brad, Christoph, Sam Jackson, Uma. I don't know what to do here.
Really?
I don't know what to do.
Do you feel 50-50 split? You actually feel you're on the line?
I really am on the line. I think I might have to go more with PTA just because they really do feel like the PTA players.
Yeah.
Whereas Leo and Brad don't feel like they belong to Quentin.
No.
Hoffman sort of does feel like he belongs to PTA in a sense.
In some ways, yeah.
Yeah, like
Scotty J is like the most iconic PSH character that has ever existed.
I love Phil Parma.
Dude, huge Phil Parma fan.
Yeah,
his scene when he comes in, he's like, I got Frank on the phone. She hangs up, starts slapping him, and he starts crying.
Great.
That scene, I lose it every time.
I just like getting like the adult magazines and all that stuff.
Do you still want the food? What?
God, I miss that guy. I might. So yeah, I think I might have to give the edge to PTA's crew here.
I give the edge to PTA's crew, and it's for the sole reason you just described, which is that if you're not arguing for Daniel Day-Lewis, who by the way is a PTA guy, you're arguing for probably the other best actor of his generation, which is Philip Seymour Hoffman, and he has both. Like that's like done and done. You're talking about right now. You look at the NBA, you're like, oh yeah, let me just take the best two players and put them on one team, and then
so here's a question. Would you take Scotty J, Phil Parma, and the Master, right? So those three performances from Hoffman, and you put them up against Sam Jackson as Jules, Sam Jackson as Ordell, and Sam Jackson as like Steven in Django, or something like that.
You're asking me which three?
Yeah.
Oh, PSH, easy. But if you're talking about the best three performances,
I got to go to Sam Jackson there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I think Ordell is an incredible performance.
Is Ordell the character from Jackie Brown?
Yeah, and Steven is the best thing about Django, for sure.
Yeah, Django was a really interesting rewatch for me when we reviewed it last year on the show, because I saw it in theaters, and I couldn't stand the final 40 minutes of it. I thought it was like, why is this movie still going? It was so long. Mm-hmm. But then on rewatch, like, it didn't bother me as much that it was as long as it was, and there was a lot of scenes in it that I was like, man, this is good. Like, this is so good. Mm-hmm. And Candy is such a good character. Christoph basically is just winning another Oscar for the same character again, but like he's still awesome. Like he's so similar, but he's still so good. It's probably the only time I can think of in history that an actor has won 2 Oscars for effectively playing the same character. Like, even though it's not in the same movie, right? Like I can't think of another one where. I don't know what Jason Robards was like in Julia, but like, anyway. So I think I lean into PTA, and if you're talking about the best 3 performances total from either, I probably still lean into PTA. I mean, you give me Hans Landa, that's really high on my list. Like, I think it's the best character Tarantino's ever created is Hans. So it's really high up there. I think Jules from Pulp Fiction is pretty memorable, like close to as memorable as it gets. And you mentioned The Bride. It's really impressive.
So I will say that the character I feel like we are giving short shrift to, and to be fair, he did not create the character, is Jackie Brown.
Oh, Pam Grier is Jackie Brown.
I mean, because Elmore Leonard wrote Rum Punch, but to me, Jackie Brown, I know she's not an original creation like Hans Landa. She is the most fully fleshed out, full-fledged character in a Tarantino movie, I think.
Interesting.
Because she, Pulp Fiction doesn't really have a lead per se, same with the Reservoir Dogs, or what we do know of Mr. Orange, is like kind of a lie. I don't know. Jackie Brown, though, that's a beautiful love story, which Quentin doesn't really do a lot of. I love Jackie and Max Cherry together. When you just see her without makeup coming out of jail and her hair's all nappy, like that performance is special.
I think that movie for you, I would just have to guess, is a clear age bias. It came out exactly at the right time for you, because I feel like you're at the age where you could appreciate Pulp Fiction so
like
fully.
13.
Yeah, but you were like in love with Pulp Fiction already, right?
Yes.
So when it came out, it was the second coming. It was the only thing you cared about.
Papa's got a brand new bag. Yeah.
And I feel like for me, that movie existed when I was a kid. I watched it, but it's always seemed like because the first 2 he wrote, and that's just an adaptation. It's like the only time he's ever done that, right?
Yeah.
It always just felt like a little less of a Tarantino movie, and it's like I don't know.
That's fair. You can ding it. You can knock some points off of it for that, but
yeah. But I mean, it is good. I rewatched it like last year, and then like a week later, I got to meet Robert Forster at an event, so he was great. But all right, so I go with PTA here for recurring performers. What do you? Same?
I'm gonna go PTA as well.
Okay. Now we're on to most overrated. I almost feel like this one can be skipped. This feels like a.
Oh, I'm not skipping it. I'm ready.
You want to overrate PTA hard?
Yeah, I think that there's a definite answer here, and that is The Master.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You just think that movie is like
The Master is on people's top 10 of the decade lists and stuff. I'm like, you're crazy. You're out of your mind. No.
You just did your top 10 of the decade, right? Or you were in the process of writing it when I talked to you
Something
at
like that. I don't know.
Chicago?
Yeah, I think I had to submit a top 5 list. Yes.
You told me Warrior was on your list, right?
Yeah, it was number 5.
It's such a good movie.
But yeah, The Master is when I look at these movies and like what's rated properly, I think everything's pretty rated properly except for The Master, which is way too high.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably... I mean, that movie is rated extraordinarily high. I probably would go as far as to say that Inherent Vice is the one... sorry, not Inherent Vice.
Phantom Thread?
Yes. I'd probably vote Phantom Thread because I think it got so much hype and so much praise just because it was Daniel Day-Lewis and it was his last movie and it was them together again. And that really, if you put any other actor in that movie, almost any other actor in that movie, I probably don't even hear of it. Like I hear of it.
Right.
I hear of it in the way that you and I hear about movies because like we're going to see what comes out.
Right.
Like we'll go see screenings. We'll get the PR stuff to go write about them or do reviews. Mm-hmm. But like it would be that movie where like the small PR company is sending me a thing and it's like this movie where Joaquin Phoenix is the only name you need to know. Well, he's too good. Like give me anybody else. Like you know what I'm saying? You give me somebody who's just medium, and it's like I just don't ever see it. Maybe on an airplane, possibly, but it's one of those movies that I don't know if it even got a theatrical release. Feels like that what that movie would be if it didn't have him in it.
Do you feel like Punch Drunk Love is properly rated?
I don't think
Or
that movie
underrated or what? I don't like it.
I've seen it once.
Yeah.
I thought it was quirky and fun. I've never wanted to go back and rewatch it. It just doesn't feel special.
Yeah, it doesn't do it for me.
And it also has never felt like it was a movie that people gave that much credit to. I mean, I think The Master is amazing. So I don't think it's a top 10 of the decade movie, but I think that it's rare you get that much power and performance in one movie. And we didn't even talk about Amy Adams, how good she is in that movie. I mean, all 3 of the leads in that movie are unbelievable. Like it's kind of an underrated Philip Seymour Hoffman performance. He's like creepy and weird and amazing. And Joaquin kind of steals the show, which is crazy.
Yeah, I just again because it's something that I wouldn't really want to go back and rewatch. I think it's a little overrated.
Yeah, I got to give Phantom Thread. I don't really think that there's a Tarantino movie that gets more credit than it deserves at this point. I think the one I would have maybe voted for would be Hateful Eight, but I don't think people like that movie very much. I mean, sometimes I see people vote for that movie and tell me that they think it's incredible. Like sometimes I will see people and they're like, my favorite Tarantino movie is Hateful Eight. That seems insane. It seems incredible that somebody would think that. But like, it doesn't feel like that's the general consensus. It feels like the general consensus of that movie was just kind of underwhelming.
Yeah.
You would agree?
Yes.
Yeah. So, all right. So this is the last and final question. So you got to give me your top 3 movies per director, and then you got to tell me which one you would have a harder time deleting.
All right. I mean, I've got it. My top 3 PTAs are Boogie Nights, Magnolia, and There Will Be Blood.
Yeah.
And my top 3 Tarantinos are his first 3, Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, Jackie Brown.
And I have a feeling I know where you're going with
And
this.
I would actually get rid of There Will Be Blood.
All 3. You have to delete all 3.
No, I thought you said you have to...
Now you choose your top 3, and one of that top 3, gone forever, deleted from existence. Those 3 movies are gone forever. Which one's the harder one to get rid of? All 3 movies, not just one of them.
No, then, I mean, it's harder to get rid of the Tarantino movies, so you get rid of the Paul Thomas Anderson movies, I think.
And
I would not want to live in a world without Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown.
Boogie Nights, Magnolia, There Will Be Blood. And I'm trying to think if I feel differently about the PTA movies. Is There Will Be Blood? Because the only option would be There Will Be Blood, The Master.
Yeah, wait. What are your 3 movies per director? That's what I want to know.
Well, I believe it's the same 3 for PTA because
Okay.
I don't think that I would put The Master over There Will Be Blood, and I don't like Punch Drunk Love enough. Heart Eight's kind of irrelevant. So, and Phantom Thread is good but not great. So it's those 3. But it's my 3rd and 4th favorite film ever made. So, there's where we start. And then for Tarantino, I got to go Pulp Fiction. I got to go Reservoir Dogs. Oh, man. And the last Tarantino movie that I would pick as my favorite, I think it's probably...
Bastards.
Probably Bastards. Bastards, Kill Bill, or Django. Yeah, it's definitely... Oh, is it Kill Bill? I really liked Kill Bill. Nah, it's Bastards.
I knew you were going to say that. But
Really?
Yeah.
How come?
I know. I think that's how most people would put it too.
You think Reservoir Dogs is top 3 still for most people? I feel like that movie has aged out. Like, people don't talk about it anymore.
That's crazy to me. I mean, Reservoir Dogs is like a timepiece.
Right.
It's just like the gears and the clock, and they all just go perfectly together.
Yeah, it's like, and well, it's also it's so funny that it's of its time before that time even was. Like, Pulp Fiction created that time. Reservoir Dogs is before that time even started.
I think Reservoir Dogs may be his most, not that it is perfect, but I think it may be his most perfect.
Right. I'd have to go back and watch it because it's been a few years on that one. When I rewatched Pulp Fiction, I was like jaw on the floor of how good it still was. Like, I couldn't believe how good it all was. But if I had to delete 3 of these movies, oh man, it's harder to delete Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, and Inglourious Basterds because Pulp Fiction is Pulp Fiction. But I delete them and I keep the other 3. I keep the 3 PTA movies. I keep the 3 PTA movies because if I had to live in a world without Boogie Nights and Magnolia, like, I could get rid of There Will Be Blood. I could do it. It would suck because it's a sweet movie that it exists, and I'm excited someday to go back and rewatch it, like, comb through it. But Boogie Nights and Magnolia, most of, like, I would say of my favorite 30 or 40 performances ever in history of movies, like 7 of them are in those movies or something.
I mean,
like,
what's your favorite movie out of all these movies? Is it Boogie Nights?
Yeah, it's my 3rd favorite movie ever.
Favorite movie ever. Okay.
It was number 2 for the longest time.
Because I give Tarantino the edge here because I think I have Pulp Fiction 1, then Boogie Nights and Magnolia may be 2 and 3.
Okay.
But then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, are like all Tarantino.
You don't like any of the rest of the PTA movies that much.
I really like There Will Be Blood. That's a great movie, but I don't know that I like it more than Bastards or Jackie Brown or.
So after There Will Be
Bill.
Blood, though, it sounds like you're not really a fan of anything else PTA has really done.
I mean, Hard 8 was fine.
Yeah. You think Thread is pretty overrated.
No, Thread I like. I like Thread.
Master you think's overrated.
The Master is overrated, and Punch Drunk Love I don't love, and Inherent Vice I can't stand. So Hard 8 and Phantom Thread are both like B+ movies for me.
Fair enough.
The others are in the A's, and the others I don't care about.
In the end, better director. You go Quentin Tarantino. It sounds like.
I gotta go Quentin. I gotta go my boy. I just, he grew up watching these movies in a video store, working in a video store. It's like the dream. I would be working at a video store if Collider didn't give me a job. I would find the last video store out there and work there.
You'd go campaign for Vidiots to reopen.
I think that there's something special about him. There's something in the way that he talks, in the way that he stages action. He just speaks fluid film. He's a walking, talking encyclopedia of cinema, and yeah, that appeals to me. The premises of his movies appeal to me.
In the end, I give PTA the nod. It's tight for me, and I can recognize that PTA's got more bad movies, and he's got more bad or mediocre movies than Tarantino has. But what I don't see in Tarantino's movies as much that I like in PTA's movies, and why I would give him the nod, is that I have more faith in the ability to combine the subtlety and the nuance of the writing in A Phantom Thread with the cinematic vision of something like A There Will Be Blood to give me more unique, interesting, different movies for the rest of his career.
But you haven't seen his worst film. So it's like if you haven't seen filmmaker at his worst, you like...
Maybe I'm just protecting myself.
That's what it is. It's like, God, if I hadn't seen Inherent Vice and could just wipe that movie out of my memory, I might be talking, way better about Paul Thomas Anderson. But I can't just ignore this what is essentially an abomination on his
you just
resume.
think that it's like you're this talented and you made this, that kind of thing. Like
it was a real head scratcher, man. It's like just like how much dope did you smoke when you guys put this together?
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to watch it soon. But I would lean in, and it's probably just a favoritism thing. But ultimately, there are elements in PTA's movies that I think I look forward to more than the best things I get out of a Tarantino movie at this point. Though I'm going to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, same as you are tonight, the same theater, and I may come out of that movie just feeling like notch on the belt, conversation just turned because it's close. It's really close.
I can't wait for tonight. I'm excited. I've heard great things.
I hope that we're not overhyped. I sometimes wish you could go into these movies with no expectation. That there was some switch, like a Men in Black thing, where you could just wipe your memory for a second and go into these movies just not knowing at all what people were thinking of it. Because it's so hard to go in with an expectation. You know what I mean?
I mean, listen, I trust Quentin because this is the world that he grew up in. He didn't grow up in Nazi-occupied France.
Right.
He wasn't around for the slave times of Django. He was there for this and this movement and the night that Hollywood lost its innocence in August 1969. So.
Yeah. I'm really excited about this movie as well. Did you watch Lion King?
Yeah.
What'd you think?
Of the reboot?
Yeah.
I thought it was fine. I don't think it could. I don't get beating up on this new Lion King because the story itself is great. It's still the Lion King. It's just that it doesn't really take any chances and it plays it safe. And there's definitely not as much emotion as there is in the animated version.
Yeah.
So
I liked it. I thought it was great.
I mean, if you're a kid and you hadn't seen the Lion King yet, or your parents wanted to see that story on the big screen, you'd be delighted.
Yeah, interesting.
But there's definitely something lost in translation there.
It's a little more hollow.
Yes.
And I think some of the complaints there is that people blamed it being hollow on like photorealistic animals like talking, which is just like a strange thing to look at. And
yeah, it was, and it didn't look great. The lions weren't great actors. Like there was something that didn't translate in their eyes.
Yeah.
But again, I feel like so many people comment in these movies from the point of view of their own perspective. I'm a 35-year-old man. They didn't make the Lion King reboot for me.
Yeah. Fair.
So
fair enough.
I don't know.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up the conversation here today. Leave the thoughts below in the comments. What do you think? Do you take Tarantino? Do you take PTA? And specifically, what are your top 3 movies from each director? And whose would you have a harder time deleting that top 3 from existence if it was up to you? One more time, Sneider, where can the folks find you?
At the InSneider on Twitter, Instagram, and Cameo.
Gotta get a Cameo. You guys can find me at Twitter, Instagram, Ben Bateman Media, Team Action Show on Twitter, Action Industries everywhere else. And get your tickets now. Action Live in New York, August 29th. We're doing the Thursday show at the New York Comedy Club. We've got a whole live set we're doing there at 10:15. So tickets are on sale now. If you're a patron in the Action Army, patreon.com/Team Action, you get a discount code we'll send to you. To
Buy tickets for the live event in New York for the Schmodown because 2 out of 3, it's going to be us.
It's probably going to be us.
One of us.
One of us will be there.
Unless it's Kalinowski, which would be terrible.
Yeah, one of us will probably be there. He's not going to win.
We'll kneecap his ass like I Tonya.
It's going to be amazing. New York's going to be so much fun, guys. I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Once again, Jeff, thanks for hanging out and doing the thing with it.
I think this just may be my masterpiece.
All right. Bye, guys.